Yeah, there's a wonderful little story that I like to just to illustrate these concepts of scarcity versus abundance and these competing visions and the temptation of going for scarcity rather than a sense of abundance. I think it's well illustrated in the Gospel of Mark, Mark 8, a little story that follows a feeding of thousands by Jesus, and then a confrontation he has with Pharisees, and then he gets in the boat with the disciples, those closest to him. And Mark is explicit that it says they're having a conversation among themselves, that one of them forgot to go to the store to buy bread. So they're talking among themselves. But Mark is explicit in saying, and they had one loaf with them. It's explicit. A detail like that, that's not an aside. That's crucial for the story. So Jesus, still reflecting on his conversation with the Pharisees, says, "Beware the leaven of the Pharisees," by which he means watch out for their influence. The way they think has a way of spreading throughout, like leaven spreads throughout an entire loaf of bread. And the disciples then have this conversation among themselves. Oh, it's because we forgot to get the bread, assuming that Jesus is upset with them, missing entirely his point, that is to beware the leaven of the Pharisees. And it says Jesus hears them, and then he starts asking them some questions. One of them being, when I fed the 7,000, how many loaves were left over? And they're you can just imagine them looking at each other and kind of thinking, is this a trick question? But then finally they say, 12? And then he says, and after we fed the 4,000, how many loaves were left over? And they say 7. And in so many words, Jesus says, when are you going to learn? And I love that story for a couple reasons. One is it speaks so well, I think, sometimes of our overall attitude. And money can sometimes exasperate this, is our fear that somehow what we've done is not good enough. So they immediately go to, he's getting after us because we forgot to get the bread. And his point, of course, has nothing to do with that. That's not on the radar at all. He was warning them about actually these Pharisees who are so, it says in another gospel, the Pharisees were lovers of money, and that's why they kept missing the point. That's maybe what he's talking about. So watch out for the way they think about things. But then he goes on to say this, and the crucial thing is the fact that the gospel has already pointed out that they do have one loaf with them. But looking at themselves, they say, we have no bread. They can't even see the loaf that they have, which, of course, Jesus is looking at when he's saying, have you forgotten what I can do with one loaf of bread? If we can feed thousands, I think we can handle the few folks we got here in the boat. And the point, I think, of the story, at least the point I take from it primarily, is left to ourselves, we never feel we have enough to do what Christ would have us do. But when we remember who's in the boat with us, that the one who has the power to multiply even the smallest things that we have, that's the way we gain a vision of abundance. And I'm thankful that Jesus is always in the boat with us.
You discussed blessings in the Old Testament and New Testament as being different. Can you summarize them in regard to money?
Yeah, what I talked about there is one of the key aspects in which the Bible discusses money. Particularly in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, there is a material component of blessing. And so money is seen as something that God does for God's people. So God promises that I will take you to a land that's flowing with milk and honey. This will be this agricultural paradise. And it's a blessing then in the sense that it's meant to point people to the God who has the power to bless God's people. So that's a kind of a crucial, there's a lot to that, but that's kind of the crucial aspect in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, a promise of material blessing pretty much disappears. And there's a couple reasons. There's one reason, and there's a couple reasons for that. The first reason is that in the book of Ephesians, it's explicit that now all blessings are contained in Christ. In other words, Christ now becomes the sign of God's favor. Material blessing is no longer important because Christ is here. God himself comes and lives with his people. The other thing is there is no longer a promise of material blessing. Instead, the conversation shifts to Jesus saying, do not worry, there will be enough. you have now a promise of sufficiency when it comes to material things. And in essence, I promise you a life of abundance, but materially, don't worry about not having enough or gaining too much. It will be sufficient for all your